Thanks again, everyone, for taking time this Thursday afternoon to discover a region that Chris and I are both very passionate about and absolutely love. So this is going to be an easy one for us to share knowledge and talk about with you. There we are. We are now live on Facebook. My name is Alicia Barrett. I'm the wine educator for Binny's, and I'm joined today by the fabulous Chris Speir. I think we've coined you now our grape guru, Chris.
Yeah, somebody I think is making a little fun of me, so but that's okay.
Chris is our wine manager at our Willowbrook location and has been with Binny's for a while and has a wealth of knowledge to share. So we are here to talk about Beaujolais. And before we get into this, I'm going to share my screen in a second. It's a region in the eastern part of France, just to the immediate south of Burgundy. Okay, and it's only 34 miles north to south, about the size of Napa Valley. So we're not talking kind of a huge area here, but winemaking has been going on for centuries. And in fact, Benedictine monks first made wine in Beaujolais in the 7th century, and it really caught on commercially in the 17th century. So lots to talk about, and we're going to be tasting 4 wines today. So let me go ahead here and share my screen, and we will get started. We just have a few slides here to kind of walk you through the region. There's a lot of information. Let me back up a little bit here. A lot of information, and we just want to express this here in this PowerPoint, and then we will go ahead and taste. So we're going to get on this journey here, Chris, and here's a nice little kind of outline and all these really key points of Beaujolais. And firstly, at the top, you see the grape varieties. And what's nice about Beaujolais, unlike a lot of other wine regions in the world, is it's relatively simple to understand. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a plethora of grape varieties, and there's not really any blending going on here. We've got Gamay Noir and Chardonnay as the primary grape varieties. You know, we see white, red, and pink wines out of this area, but it's not too hard to understand.
Yes. And if you look at this map here, it's going to help you understand kind of the different levels, if you will, within the 12 AOCs that exist. And here in that kind of pink area at the bottom, if you are shopping and you just see a wine that says Beaujolais on it, it's going to be sourced from this area. Okay, moving forward, rather northward, when you see that orange color, that Beaujolais Village, that's kind of the next tier up. We're getting a little more concentration, a little bit higher in elevation, a little bit of a different soil type there. And then finally, the most prized sites are what they refer to in Beaujolais as crus. And there are 10 of them in total, and you'll see those listed. And that's what we want to really talk about today. And we're going to tell you about each of the crus because the wines that they produce all can be very different. There's great diversity in the expressions and a lot of factors at play, which we'll get into.
Indeed.
And I will say here, if you'll notice, with the geography of the place, it's really just to the north of Lyon, and so a lot of the history with Beaujolais and its reputation for wines that pair so well with excellent food comes from this, you know, the cultural kind of capital of cuisine in Lyon, and Beaujolais being quite nearby.
Yes, the epicenter of great cuisine in France.
Have you been to Lyon, Chris, as a chef?
I have been around Lyon, but never in Lyon. But the cuisine is quite, it radiates out from there, and the influence is pervasive around France and the world. But yes, I've eaten in restaurants broadly in that area, and they are wonderful. There are so many great chefs that came from that area. Paul Bocuse, the Troyes, the list goes on and on. And Beaujolais is eminently pairable with the cuisine of Lyon and cuisines worldwide. It's such a great wine for food. It's unbelievable, really.
And you'll see here, we touched on the diversity, and really noticed too in this photograph, on the upper right here, just these rolling hills of Beaujolais. There are some steeper areas up in the cruise, but it's really quite just a picturesque, lovely place to drive through and visit. You'll see a horse as well. A lot of different farming methods practiced here in Beaujolais, and we're going to talk about a few of those, but it is really kind of this modern home to natural winemaking, along with a lot of organic and biodynamic farming taking place as well.
Indeed, they're very, very serious in this region about protecting the land and the terroir. So a lot of people working organically and biodynamically here.
So speaking of terroir, let's talk a little bit about soils, and we won't spend too much. We're going to get a little nerdy here, but it does just go to show how much diversity there is in terms of the expression of the wines, and why the wines we're going to taste today, one of the reasons anyway, why they taste and are a little bit different. So we have everything from alluvial soils to limestone to the very well-known granite outcroppings that you'll see. And lastly, this pierre bleu, this blue schist kind of volcanic soil. So lots of different kind of soils. It's almost this kind of quilt, this fabric of soils throughout the region that allow so many different wines to be made, and yet all from Gamay and Chardonnay. So pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Beaujolais is a tale of soil types, and it's really a result of a volcanic uprising and tectonic plates and slightly higher elevation. It's surrounded by limestone, as you know, in Burgundy and places like that, and that's old seabed. But here, the elevation's a little higher, and these ancient volcanic soils have been really untouched. So you've got all of these granites and igneous and metamorphic rocks here that really lend a lot to the terroir.
And don't forget, for those watching, vines love and thrive in very infertile soils. So sometimes when you look and you think limestone and granite, and they're not fertile places for things to grow, but that really is the ideal condition for grapevines. So
Indeed, one of the crews, Moulin-à-vent, is famous for having granite soils that are really high in manganese, which is actually generally considered a negative for plants in general. But what it does for the area is it actually changes the metabolism a little bit and causes chlorosis or a poor photosynthesis, making the vines really, really struggle, even beyond what a normal poor, well-drained soil will do. And the wines from there are generally very powerful compared to the rest of the area.
And that is a spoiler alert for the end of our little show here, and we get to Moulin-à-vent. And yes, one of the most age-worthy crews. So here we go. We talked about the environmental initiatives, and Chris, do you want to share a little bit? This, at least in my mind, started, if those watching know of Kermit Lynch, a really well-regarded and very well-respected importer of wine here in the United States. But he termed the Gang of Four, I believe, in the 80s was his term. Do you want to share a little bit about that, Chris?
Sure, I would be happy to. Yeah. So there was a gentleman named Jules Chauvet who kind of was at the epicenter of getting back to older techniques, pre-industrialized farming techniques. So he really focused on making wines that didn't use industrial fertilizers or pesticides, with no additions, no acidification, no chaptalization, and even in some cases, no sulfur additions, although many of these producers will add a bit of bottling sulfur, but will work through the whole winemaking process without it. So one of the wines we're going to taste today is the Marcel Lapierre Morgon. He was a member of the Gang of Four. Jean-Paul Thévenet, Guy Breton, and Foillard were the four. And they all are still really great wineries. And you're right, it really kicked off what has now become, 40 years later, a huge movement in natural wine, whatever that means to people, because it's really ill-defined. But here, it just means making good old-fashioned wine with classic techniques and not adding anything.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
Yes, and with that, one other aspect about Beaujolais I love is that it's not a fussy wine. You don't need to kind of contemplate it for hours for it to be appreciated. I know very few people that do not enjoy Beaujolais. It can really appeal to the masses. So when we are able to spend some more time in person with friends and family, this is a great wine to go with, and hopefully our tasting today will convince you of that as well. So
yeah, I agree. Well, Beaujolais is like a wine of pure joy, really. It's all about the expression of beautiful fruit, and of course it can become quite serious in the cruise, but they still have a certain sense of joie de vivre that you don't find in every wine. They're just super fun, and they pair with all kinds of stuff. So great wines just for everyday life.
yes, and with that, we'll move into Beaujolais, the largest regional appellation here. It's half of the region's production. So 50% of the wines here will just be Beaujolais AOC. And these are those very fun, very festive wines. They're very reasonable. $10, would you say, Chris, around there?
Yeah, $10.
They're cheery wines. They're very easy drinking. Most are made along with Beaujolais Village via semi-carbonic maceration, which enhances that kind of fruity quality without any of the strong tannins. And so this is your kind of cheerful party wine. We sell a lot of it at Binny's. So ask a wine consultant for a producer that they recommend, but this is a great value and a very easy drinking wine.
Yeah, and this is where you'll find the rosés and the chardonnays along with Beaujolais Village, which are not generally made in the cruise. Yeah.
Correct. So let's go to Beaujolais Village, and we are going to taste now. So we'll go full screen here as we taste. We are starting with George Duboeuf, Beaujolais Village here, and unfortunately, I think it was in January, right, Chris, that George Duboeuf passed away, but he has been a pioneer for the region and quality wine production, and really helped kind of put Beaujolais Nouveau on the map decades ago and continue to elevate the quality of that production.
Yeah, sometimes known as the king or the pope of Beaujolais. And yeah, he couldn't have done more to bring attention to the region around the world. And he really, it's a huge negotiant company that he put together. He works with 300 plus growers, even bottles things under the individual domain names. But yeah, unfortunately, yes, January he passed away.
So for those tuning in on Facebook or on Zoom, we'd love to hear what you are drinking, so we can comment, and also any questions you have, please use the chat function or the comment section on Facebook, and we'll get back to you either during the session here or afterwards on Facebook. But we'd love to know what you're drinking and what you think. If you have this Beaujolais Village, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And do you agree with us? Do you think this is a really kind of cheery, festive, easy drinking wine? It certainly has a plethora of red fruits, right, Chris?
Absolutely. It's actually this vintage is a little more serious than I might have expected. There's a little bit of tannic grip on the back, but it is still loaded with red fruit and very fun to drink, really well balanced. And I mean, I can only imagine that it's going to be absolutely fantastic with the pâtés, terrines, saucisson, all of the things that Lyon is famous for as far as charcuterie goes. Yeah, great way to start your evening. Even a chicken liver salad or pâté would be great with this, which is pretty popular there.
I'll start my chicken liver now. I totally agree in terms of if we're, talking about an evening progression here, or maybe we'll start in the afternoon actually. This is your great aperitif. This is going to go with your cheese board and your charcuterie, as Chris mentioned, and your pâtés and all your dips and all the accompaniments of that board. It's really, again, it's very inoffensive. It's easy drinking. It's all this muddled kind of cranberry and raspberry, some tartness as well. And there's acid that's there. You're right, there's a little bit more tannin than I'm used to, but everything's kind of coming together in a cohesive way on your palate, and it's a really fun wine. You can get that confected note. There's no doubt that they're using semi-carbonic here, and you get a little bit of that confected kind of Kirsch bubblegum element. But yeah, a really fun kind of cheerful wine.
Absolutely. For you cheese freaks out there, if you're like me, I like to pair regionally. So this would be great with something like Saint Félicien or Saint Marcelin, which are made just a little south of here. And also Saint Nectaire would be great. Little more assertive cheese, but would be really nice with this. And I think that slight tannic grip that's not always present in Beaujolais Village will do some favors with, some of that charcuterie and cheese.
I agree. And this is the Beaujolais and the Beaujolais Village levels. You should not be afraid to put a little chill on these wines. And it'll kind of keep in their kind of fresh profile. And I think you'll find that it actually kind of really helps the wine, and it helps it in the diversity of food pairings that you can have. So lots of Beaujolais, we want to serve them a little bit cooler than we would kind of more fuller bodied reds. So do pop them in your fridge for a little bit before you enjoy them, but especially these Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village level wines.
I absolutely agree with that. If you are one of the rare people these days who has a cellar, straight out of the cellar at 55 degrees is just about perfect for a wine like this. But if you don't, 20, 30 minutes in the fridge at most, and you're ready to go. But it really keeps the wine focused and beautiful. It will do you a lot of favors, not serving it at 70 or 75 degrees for sure.
Yes. Let's don't forget room temperature and how they advise you to serve a lot of red wines. Room temperature is actually in like the low 60s. So unless your apartment or home is kept in the low 60s, we're always looking to make sure our wines are a little bit cooler than our true room temperatures. But all right, let's continue here. I want to get into the crus. This is the good stuff. Cru Beaujolais. Excellent value. We oftentimes, when people come into our stores and say they have, 20 or 30 bucks to spend, this is where it's at, folks. All right. You can get excellent, high quality, delicious wines at a great price. And you just don't find that value everywhere in the world. And I'll refrain from saying where, but it's a great place to go. So let's get in here. So remember, we're in that northern part of the region. We're getting a little more elevation here and some different soil types. And I've put these in order, these crus in order based on their profile of kind of the lighter bodied ones, kind of the ones that you drink more in their youth. And we'll move through to those that are fuller and more structured and more age-worthy. So hopefully you can take away a few tips as you leave here and go shopping and kind of remember, oh, that's that kind of a lighter profiled cru, or that's a more structured and kind of fuller style. So we'll start in Rainier. This is the newest cru that was created in '88, and it's very aromatic, it's very light, it's a very kind of fruity early drinking style. Not too big, but it's producing just kind of fun fruity wines. And you can still get those red fruits, but a little more ripeness here that you might find. So you might kind of start to flirt with a little bit of plum and black fruits as well. We'll then go into Chiroubles here, the highest in elevation. And so when we get up in elevation, we're also looking to maximize our exposure to sunlight in terms of the direction in which that kind of hill faces. So up here in Chiroubles, the highest cru we have, and we find a certain finesse, I think, to this wine. And we sell a few of these here, Chris, at Binny's. Have you had any recently of Chiroubles?
Yeah, I have, and I think it's very nice, very elegant style, very floral. I really like it. Definitely for those who want a lighter, more aromatic expression. That high elevation really helps out with that. Has a little bit of a minerally aspect too. I think it's really nice and a little cru with delicious results.
Yeah, and if you if you're coming into Beaujolais, take into consideration kind of where you're coming from. Are you coming from a more kind of structured, fuller bodied red wine? If so, maybe starting with Chiroubles or Renier is not for you. You want to start with some of the crus we'll get to in a little bit. But if you love, say, really delicate Pinot Noirs, for example, you might come in on this lighter side and then work your way down. So our next tasting here will be with Brouilly. This is the largest cru, so there's a lot of variation. So sometimes it's hard to, kind of pinpoint an exact style, but I think the one we have here represents it well. So I will stop sharing here for a second. We are having Chateau Thivon's Reverdun Brouilly, and this is 2018.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite producers of all time. Absolutely great, located on Mont Brouilly. This vineyard happens to be directly opposite Mont Brouilly with an eastern exposure, planted on pink granite. And, not to get too much in the weeds, but, Reverdun, you think you know something when you know about Brouilly, but there are many smaller things that get parsed up in many of these crus. So it's not just one big thing. And this one kind of encircles the old volcano in the center. But this is a beautiful wine from a winery that's been around for a long, long time.
So coming from the Beaujolais Village, one of the things I first pick up, there's more tension in my mouth. The acid and the fruit are more, they're kind of playing off one another a little bit more. There's more florality for sure than the Beaujolais Village. I find an elegance to the aromatic part of the wine that I kind of didn't see before. And overall, we're still red fruit dominant here. It feels, or tastes rather, a little bit more layered. In terms of, I think there are a lot more expressions of red fruit, and they're a little bit more concentrated than we saw with the Beaujolais Village.
Yeah, I think this is gorgeous. The acidity is just singing, and the fresh, ripe strawberries are just unbelievable in this wine. And there's definitely a sense of minerality and such a fine, delicate structure to this. Really super integrated. I think it's fantastic.
Generally with these lighter styles, as we went through Renier and Chiroubles and now into Brouilly, we're looking at age ranges of usually about 3-ish years is kind of the optimal time to be consuming these wines. Of course, there are exceptions. And I think actually this one is one of those. It's 2 years old now. I think it has definitely another few years in it. But they're generally meant to be consumed relatively young.
Indeed. I don't want to get off track, but I collect the Côte de Brouilly from the same producer. So this is a 2015, and it'll keep going for quite a while. Really amazing wines. And boy, oh boy, would this be incredible with a roasted chicken. I mean, wow. Yep. Or a fillet of salmon. It's just totally on point for the style.
I love it. And especially with that roasted chicken, you're starting to get a little bit of a savory note that comes through on the wine. Again, a point of difference from the Beaujolais Village that I think all of those kind of herbs, the dried herbs that you would get on the chicken and the kind of toasted, burnt kind of skin, everything would play really well here.
Yeah, I don't think there's a better wine on the planet for a classic French roast chicken with a little pain jus. Beaujolais just fits the bill so perfectly. Couldn't be better.
And Tiven in this wine, they're doing whole cluster fermentation. It then does see 6 months in oak foudres. And Tiven is in the process, if they haven't already completed it, but of completely shifting to all organic viticulture. So kind of tying in that sustainable element we were talking about.
Indeed, one of the great old wineries.
So Côte de Brouilly, another cru here, much smaller than Brouilly. And Chris mentioned the same producer has a Côte de Brouilly, which we also sell at Binny's. So encourage you to pick that up.
Definitely buy it.
But we start to amp up, I think, a little bit more of the structure here, right, with Côte de Brouilly compared to its predecessor, right?
Absolutely. In particular from Tivan, I think you can definitely lay them down for quite a while. They really start hitting their stride at 5 to 8 years, in my opinion. But yeah, this is an appellation after my heart. It's everything I love about Beaujolais. It has elegance, but it is a little more powerful at the same time. And the layers of fruit and spice and mineral, this is the area where they have that blue volcanic rock. And man, great wines.
Yeah. I can see you getting a little teary there, Chris.
Don't be surprised by that. I'm very emotionally invested in these wines.
I love it. And you mentioned the other thing too of these wines really coming into their own in kind of 5 to 8 years. So, definitely lay one down for that time. But what's special too about Beaujolais is that you don't have to. You're not going to open a bottle and have a glass and say, "Oh my, I really wish I would not have opened this." It's just way too early. It's still going to drink beautifully in its youth. And so that's another kind of, for me at least, tending to be impatient. I'm one that is not too patient when holding on to wine. That's why I'm safe to buy Beaujolais.
Totally agree. My solution to problems like that is that I love to buy several bottles and pop one right away. I mean, I can't wait. I have to know what the vintage is giving me, but then there are always some left, and I dole them out slowly. Beaujolais is pretty much a constant companion for me at the table, so I always have to have quite a bit on hand.
So quickly here, I'll just mention Saint-Amour here. We get some really seductive red fruit here with Saint-Amour, still quite a lively kind of structure to it. And we don't carry too many of these wines, unfortunately, but if you do find one, I encourage you to pick it up. It has kind of great elegance and like a lively, kind of bright red fruit profile that I think you'll start to enjoy. And I think we start to see kind of a spiciness introduced here with Saint-Amour that will carry through as we talk about the other crus, and as we taste, we'll start to get some warmer spices in the wines. So let's do that. Let's taste Fleury. Our next wine here is Chateau de Poncy, and this is their 2016 Fleury. We have this on sale right now for $19.99. So, 4 years old here with Fleury. And when you start learning about wine, you're told Fleury is it's kind of the most feminine of the crus. So easy to remember, right? Fleury, feminine. But sometimes I think people mistake the femininity of the wine for a wine that has to be consumed in its youth. And that's not the case with Fleury. And for those enjoying this today at home, I hope you'll see that still now 4 years old and still is bringing a lot to the glass.
Absolutely, a very elegant appellation with high-toned floral notes, but it can age, as this one attests to. And here we're looking at a little more traditional Burgundian winemaking. This chateau has been owned by the Bouchards since the early part of the 20th century, maybe the first decade. And of course, they're a great negociant in Burgundy. And they bring to the table, de-stemming, which is unlike everything else we have here. And also use Bouchard barrels, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, send some Burgundy barrels my way. I'd be happy to use them too. So yeah, we have a departure here in winemaking with this wine compared to the ones we've had and still the one we will have, in that they are making this wine traditionally. They're destemming the grapes. It's not fully whole cluster. So they're really kind of taking, you're right, that Burgundian influence from the Bouchard kind of home, if you will. It's the same winemaker too. Frederick Weber is the winemaker, and Chateau de Poncy has been around since the 900s. So quite, you know, a lot of times we think of really old estates, and yeah, we think of Burgundy and we think of Bordeaux, but a lot of history here in Beaujolais as well.
Yeah, this is a real ancient place, and this wine is holding up incredibly well. You still get that bright acidic lift, but there's definitely amped up richness on the mid palate here. I think it's really delicious. I would love to have this with like a roasted loin of pork or a crown roast. Man, it is good. It's doing well.
Any, I think pork, I think even kind of like a Cornish hen, even starting to flirt with a little bit of some game, I think you could kind of bring into this wine. We start to, I mentioned a little bit of savory quality on the last wine. I think that's amped up. I think the earthiness is coming a little bit with age, a little more tertiary with that, but you can definitely tell the difference in winemaking here.
Yeah, there's definitely a pronounced earthy aspect that we didn't necessarily see in the others. You know, yeah. I got more kind of straightforward mineral rock type notes, but here it's definitely earth. And this has the stuffing to handle some of those traditional Burgundian dishes like coq au vin or even beef bourguignon, I think would be nice with this.
Yep. And the great part about this, if you're making beef bourguignon, it's a $20 bottle of wine. So, you know, you don't cry too much when you're putting a cup into your dish and consuming the rest of it. So.
Right. The best way to do it.
All right. So let's power through here as we finish our time. A couple more crus before we get to our last tasting here. So Julianas, as we get into these final ones, now we're really seeing some more fullness in the body, relatively speaking. And Julianas too, for me, always has a rusticity to it that some of the other crus don't. Slightly more tannins and kind of a real backbone to this wine. Similar to Chenas, more spice, kind of a woody element here to Chenas. It's a difficult cru to find. You'll notice how small it is. We do carry a few at Binny, so I encourage you to try these. Was, as you see, a favorite of Louis XIII, and encourage you to see what you think. But with these, we're really talking now age-worthy wines, kind of for 8-10 years. Would you say, Chris?
Yeah, definitely so. And, you know, the other benefit here is you can have a wonderful meal with your Chenas and save your money to buy that Louis XIII cognac to finish off your night.
There you go.
Although you'd have to save a lot of money to do that.
And lastly, before we get to our Morgon, we're going to talk about Moulin-à-vent. Arguably, probably the most age-worthy cru. Morgon's definitely up there as well. You know, maybe they're fighting for it, but I always in my head, you know, I think of that windmill and I think of Moulin-à-vent, and it really is kind of a very structured cru. You see a lot of kind of red and black fruit here. The fruit is riper, it's more concentrated, it's more robust. And so, as I mentioned earlier, if you do come from kind of a love of fuller bodied wines, maybe start here with Moulin-à-vent or Morgon, which we'll have now.
Totally agree.
So let's do our last wine here, which I'm very excited about, from Morgon.
So this is Marcel Lapierre. This is one of the gang of four that we were talking about earlier. Marcel, unfortunately, has passed on, but his kids have taken over, and they're carrying on that tradition of natural winemaking. One interesting little note here is they try to always make two versions of their wines. One where they dose it with sulfur just before bottling, just a tiny bit, just enough for the bottle, and then a version where they add no sulfur whatsoever. And you can tell which one you're buying. We always see the one with sulfur in it, but on the back of the label here, there's a tiny little S there. That means they put the sulfur in it, and if it has N, it means non-sulfured.
I actually did not know that. That's
there you go.
And for those watching, you know, sulfur really helps make sure that wine is preserved in bottle, that no other reactions are going on in that wine. So you can rest assured when you open it that it's going to be in a good condition. You know, these are minimal levels, and oftentimes they're much lower than a lot of foods that you consume that have sulfates in it. So not a lot there, but good to know the distinction. So yeah, original part of the Gang of Four here with Morgon, and again we see a structured fuller wine. The big thing I picked up here, these warming spices, I got this kind of like evergreen, kind of woody, I don't know if it's herbal, something like that, that's coming through that really adds great complexity to this wine.
Yeah, I would say there's like a hint of spruce in the nose, and definitely some of those warm baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg. This is always a gorgeous wine.
The other difference as well, so firstly, this also saw some time in old Burgundy barrels, so of that. But the tannins of the wine, unlike previous that were kind of just really soft and supple, these I feel are more defined. And they're not kind of overly drying in any way. They're very well integrated, so they don't stick out, but they're finer and more precise than in the previous wines.
Yeah, totally agree. Very, very fine tannic structure. Beautifully done. Again, whole cluster fermentation, or what we'd call semi-carbonic, which, you know, people are always a little bit up in arms about whether something's carbonic or not, but, you know, semi-carbonic is just a whole cluster fermentation. You can see that done in Burgundy and in Oregon Pinot Noir. It's not going to make your wine necessarily that banana pear drop bomb like full carbonic maceration is. Mm-hmm. This wine is gorgeous.
The other big food pairing that we didn't talk about, especially actually with the earlier wines, is Asian cuisine. This is Beaujolais is one of my go-tos, and my husband and I actually cook a lot of Asian cuisine. We order a lot of it, and we love spice. We just basically, you give us a lot of flavor and we're really happy. So when you have a lot of those flavors, and if you have spice in your dish and you have acid in your dish, Beaujolais is awesome. And we mentioned kind of a light chill. That's how you're kind of going to make sure it really kind of calms your palate after that spice. And one of my favorite Thai restaurants in London, we would go, and Beaujolais would just be all over their menu. So it's loved by many and pairs well with so many different cuisines. Yeah,
that's really smart, Alicia. All that upfront fruit and moderate tannin and bright acidity, they're the hallmarks of a wine that works with foods like that. And even at the Beaujolais Village level, you might introduce a little more spice because those tannins are so tame and they're so fruity, not necessarily sweet like you might want with a really, really hot dish, but a little bit of spice, it's going to handle it no problem. Really delicious. Totally agree with that.
Well, excellent. I will put up a slide here showing you all the wines we tasted today. But I hope that along this journey, you've been able to hear or taste or see all of these different expressions. And we, focused on Gamay. Of course, there are rosé versions of Gamay, and there is a little Chardonnay produced in the region. But hopefully you've seen that there is a wine kind of for everyone, and a wine for your entire meal, from the aperitif Beaujolais Village through to kind of, we were talking about maybe a fish course with the Brouilly, and then now in the Morgon, we're all the way to our kind of like main meat dish. So lots of options here. And just as a reminder, Binny's loves Beaujolais too, and we're doing 15% off of all Beaujolais until August 15th. So pop in store only. You can get the coupon on our website. But thank you for tuning in. Chris, thank you. Any final thoughts?
I would say absolutely take advantage of that coupon, because if you're uninitiated, these wines should be on your table regularly with almost anything you're serving. Great in the summer, but heartier wines for stews and braises in the winter. It's just so versatile, and there really is a wine for every occasion and every person and almost every dish. So get on that 15% coupon. And if you already are in the know, what are you waiting for?
There you go. You have no excuse then.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Find all of our virtual events on our website. Chris, thanks for your time, and we'll taste again soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Alicia. It's always fun.
All right. There are our wines from tonight. And if you would like any more resources, please do feel free to check out any of these links, particularly discoverbeaujolais.com for more information.
Good night, everybody.